Hi. So, I was thinking, obviously, talk about the Continental Classic, and I just got to thinking about, Kyle Fletcher as a whole, since honestly, his progression is insane. No one will deny that. Since, pre-show with Aussie Open at All In 23, my first ever wrestling show. And just from then till now, my God, what an improvement. What a wrestler, right? Like, what a wrestler. Personally, Kyle Fletcher is one of my favourites on the entire roster. I think Kyle's presentation, I've not seen a performer, from at least when I've started watching wrestling, which is admittedly not the longest, compared to most, find himself so quickly. You hear tales about The Rock, Stone Cold, for instance, even The Undertaker, how long it took them to find themselves, even John Cena. Most of these great wrestlers we talk about, all-timers, didn't find themselves. But Kyle took a while, don't get me wrong, he had the Aussie Open stuff, but I mean, just so nailed on with the colour, pink, the attitude of arrogance, he's a heel. And a lot of heels you get, look at Ricochet, for instance. Ricochet's a great example. Ricochet's a heel who knows he can go, but MJF's another example too. Probably the best example, in my opinion. They never want to be looking for a fight. Fletcher's like a bulldog. Fletcher is like a pit bull. He just wants to go. And he's like a caged animal. Fletcher, I don't think I've seen Fletcher turn down a true challenge unless it's obviously to get some benefit out of it. With the Briscoe challenger. But he still had those matches with Briscoe. I think Fletcher staying with Don's ridiculous. I think the biggest credit for me with Kyle Fletcher, and I think the greatest example of how just much of a star he has grown to be, is you look how stacked that Don Callis family is, right? You've got Okada, Takeshita, Josh Alexander, Hechicero, even, I'm trying to think of other people. Mark Davis himself, for instance, that's a good level to compare Fletcher to, realistically, from the come-up. And Fletcher's probably besides Okada, probably the jewel in the crown. Takeshita's on his way out at this point, so I won't include Takeshita. But he's the jewel, and he's, in my opinion, Don's favourite guy so far. He's definitely the guy Don will send for the most important type of jobs. And if we're talking about in-ring with Kyle Fletcher, I mean, if you've not seen those Ospreay matches, my God, everyone talks about the steel cage, and I think the steel cage is by far the most well-rounded wrestling match from Kyle Fletcher and Will Ospreay that I've seen personally. It's not the best, but it's probably the most well-rounded. The match against Okada in the C2 last year, the matches against Briscoe, obviously everyone loves. The match against Hangman this year at All Out, that was phenomenal. Kyle Fletcher's got no short of an amazing catalogue, and honestly, when he eventually gets that Takeshita feud, or Takeshita, that match, because it might not get a full feud, it's you don't really know what avenue Fletcher's going to go with the Takeshita versus Okada stuff, which makes it very interesting too. And honestly, I feel like that is all on Kyle. I think Kyle Fletcher didn't really intend, at least from a writing perspective originally, to have a close relationship with Takeshita. But don't get me wrong, it's all being brought through from just, funny tweets and stuff, having the ship name and just running with it. But it grew, and honestly, Kyle kind of deserves a lot of credit for the Protashita stuff. Making that much of a, it's that big of a thing for AEW specifically, that it's getting involved in possibly one of the biggest wrestling feuds of the next year. It's going to be insane, and seems like a pivotal part. So, honestly, I don't think he gets the credit for that. I think Kyle's promo is phenomenal, too. I think Kyle's promo, he speaks of a slow sort of arrogance. It's weirdly commanding, but he's still got that whine. Kyle does something that I love that MJF does, where Kyle will have a lot of, loud and a vocal presence, even through a loud crowd in a match. You got that, he's like a tennis player where you can hear the grunts and the screams, but you can hear him, especially against those Ospreay matches, he was screaming like just a madman. And Max is more for yelling words and stuff, but with Kyle it's a yell, and it honestly just makes him a bit more threatening, for lack of a better term. I don't know how to describe it. From a viewing perspective, I feel like that adds just everything he does feels intentionally purposeful to add to his presentation. He's great. I think with Kyle, for me, the biggest for the future, you've got this C2 run, which I don't think he'll win, but I think it'll be pivotal towards his just overall arc of wrestling character and story. I think when Kyle turns face, and that will eventually happen, I think Kyle Fletcher as out of kayfabe is, he's a very lovable guy. People say, from interviews and stuff, he seems very switched on, seems very humble, and so young too, you know what I mean? You'd be surprised if they don't build that company around him for the next few years. But in kayfabe, he's a horrible, horrible person, especially with what he done to Ospreay and stuff. But again, Don Callis effect, how many people do that with Callis as their influence, right? So I think when Kyle turns face, I think that's going to be really interesting to see. Kyle's obvious comparison is always, if you look at the two companies, is Dominic Mysterio, from my opinion. Because they're both very young stars, both excellent already. And honestly, both either the future of the companies and also just, I think they're both great in ring. I'll give Dominic Mysterio that credit. And I think personally, obviously I've got bias in it with the, preference on the companies and style of how the companies run. But I think Kyle's more now, if that makes sense. I feel like Dom's great. I'm not trying to make this a video talk about Dom, but I just feel like Kyle feels like a star right now, and there's only so much more to go. That's what's exciting about Kyle. But I feel like if Kyle Fletcher stayed at this level now, don't be wrong, there's only so much you can do with, a steady, a stagnating performer, if that was the case. But Kyle Fletcher's level right now is ridiculously high, and it's not just because he's so young and up and coming. He's a star now. I don't think Kyle Fletcher is, I don't want to say he's not ready for the main event scene. I think he could fit in the main event scene. I just don't think it's right. But if they put Kyle in the main event scene right now, I don't think a lot of people will complain. I feel like he's perfectly tailored for that. I think he's a phenomenal wrestler. Can put the matches, can cut the promos, has got the character. Everything's there. It's the package. It's just experience, I think, now. One of my most interesting tweets I've ever seen about wrestling was I seen someone predict Kyle Fletcher winning the belt before Ospreay, the AEW Men's World Championship. And honestly, I'm not against that. Could you imagine how good of a story that would be if Fletcher won it before Ospreay and Ospreay has to win it back, presumably at Wembley? I think that would be phenomenal. I think that would be a really good twist. I feel like that would be a great, and it's kind of the natural level up for their feud. Like, that's the thing. You look at AEW feuds, they go to such an nth degree that it's hard to kind of level up. That's the problem Swerve and Hangman have now, in my opinion, where it's went to such a degree. It's kind of hard to top that in terms of importance and stuff. Ospreay and Fletcher, I feel like the only natural way is the main belt. And I'm not against that. I don't think it will. And honestly, either way, that's great. I think if Ospreay wins the belt before Kyle should or could win it after. There's a lot of avenues to go with Kyle's future with the main belt, but it's definitely always going to be tied to Ospreay. And I think the way Kyle's disassociated himself with Ospreay has been very good. I think that's very notable, and I would like to really point that out. When he started, he was just seen as, and that was kind of his point of his heel turn, he was just seen as Ospreay's friend, Ospreay's clone. Look at the MJF match with Fletcher, which when they run that back, that's going to be phenomenal. And when that happens with Fletcher, it was so hard for him to navigate out, and I think he done that perfectly. Don Callis helped, completely agree. But how Kyle just separated that entire character from Ospreay, I feel like It's like I can't believe I'm making this comparison. It's like the Usos. The Usos, because of the Bloodline story, and I'll give this complete credit where it's due. It is true. You can now tell the Usos apart, at least from personality and how they portray themselves. Kyle and Will, they were never twins, so it's obviously to an nth degree. But Kyle and Will, you knew who Will Ospreay was, but Kyle was just a guy. I think he was just Ospreay's friend. Now Kyle Fletcher is one of the best wrestlers on the roster. He's a former TNT champ and multiple-time champion, 100% in all of wrestling. That guy's gonna just light the wrestling scene on fire for the future. I hope Kyle just continues what he's got. I don't want to say I want Kyle to do this and that. I just hope he continues what he's got. I think everything he's done so far has been phenomenal. I don't think there's any room for me to kind of have an input of do this, do that. It's not my place. And honestly, the guy's done more than great enough, so not really much else to say. Honestly, Kyle Fletcher's I just wanted to talk about how he's one of my favourites on the roster, and just the vast improvement of pre-show All In to probably one of the main events of the next one. So it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And he's going to have an excellent run in the Continental Classic. That goes without mention. What do you think about Kyle Fletcher? Is he one of your favourites in AEW or not? Where do you think he goes? And honestly, how long do you think he takes to win that AEW Men's World Championship? Because I think it's in the next 2 years or so, debatably less. But yeah, love to hear from it.